The envelope felt wrong in my hand. Too thick, too stiff, the paper colder than the October air coming through the kitchen window. I'd found it slipped under the door of my own house at 4 in the morning, and the name on the front was not mine. It read Leo Lewis, my son, but the handwriting belonged to no one I knew. A car passed on the street outside. Tires on wet leaves, that soft crunching sound that usually means autumn in Westchester. Except nothing about this felt like autumn. I slid one finger under the flap. The seal gave too easily, like it had been opened and pressed shut again. Inside, a single photograph fell to the counter. My son at his dorm, sleeping, and a shadow behind him that was not a dorm shadow. A smell came off the paper, something like the aftershave Richard Grant wore to every board meeting. Dad, I literally have an exam tomorrow. Can the existential crisis wait until after my final project presentation? Leo's text lit up my phone an hour later. Oblivious. 300 miles away at school. And that was the only reason I was still breathing. I called Patricia. The house line rang 4 times before she picked up. And I heard the old coffee machine at the far end of the line, that particular hiss it made when the pressure dropped, the one she'd been meaning to fix for a year. Mr. Lewis, Patricia said. Her voice carried that dry calm she kept for everything short of a fire. It is 4:30 in the morning. This is not a normal hour for you to call. I found something at the door, I said. A photo of Leo. Someone was in his room. Stai calmo, Daniel. Gridare non aiuta nessuno. Her Italian came out like a slap, gentle but firm. The coffee will keep you awake. It might also remove rust. Drink it. I am coming over. Do not touch the envelope with your bare hands again. I set the photograph face down. My hands had gone cold. The kind of cold that starts at the wrist and climbs. A man nearing 50, a real estate developer who had designed 3 shopping centers and a string of townhouses off the Hudson, and none of that meant a thing when someone put a shadow behind my son's bed. Patricia arrived 20 minutes later with her own key, the one I'd given her when she started as housekeeper 10 years back. She did not knock. She walked straight to the kitchen, set down a tin of espresso, and began loading the old machine. The smell of ground beans filled the room, bitter and warm, fighting the cold that had followed me from the doorway. Show me, she said. I handed her the envelope with a dish towel. She turned it over, held it to the light above the sink. The seal is broken. Someone read this before you. Or someone wanted you to think they did. Who sends a photo of my son sleeping and signs it to him but not from themselves? She poured 2 cups, pushed one toward me, and leaned against the counter. Someone who wants you afraid. Fear is cheap. It costs them nothing. It costs you sleep. She sipped. Richard was at the club Tuesday. I saw the car, the silver one with the Connecticut plate. I did not answer. I picked up the photo again. The shadow had a shape. A shoulder, maybe. The edge of a watch strap catching light. Richard wore a watch like that. A thin silver band Emily had given him one Christmas before things took a turn for the worse. You think he was in Leo's room, I said. I think someone was. I think the someone knows this house better than a stranger should. The cameras. Daniel. Have you looked at the cameras? I had not. I walked to the office, the room at the back where I kept the monitors, and powered the system. The screen, lit blue. 4 feeds, front door, driveway, Leo's room, the hallway. Leo's feed showed the room empty, not messy, empty. The bed stripped, the desk cleared, the closet door open and bare. His things are gone, I said. Patricia came to the doorway. She looked at the screen, then at me. He is at school. Remember, he texted you. The room being empty means someone cleaned it, not that someone took him. On the screen, the timestamp moved. 2:14 in the morning, a figure entered from the hallway. Not tall, not Richard's height. The figure moved to the closet, then the desk, then stood at the center of the room for almost a full minute before leaving. The camera caught the side of a face as the figure turned. Patricia's face. I looked at her. You were in his room. I checked the house. That is my job. I went in at 2. I saw the envelope by the door first. Came to tell you. You were asleep. So I went back to look. The room was already like this. Already like this? Already. Whoever did it before 2. I did not take his things. I would not. The coffee machine gave its final hiss behind us. Patricia walked back to the kitchen, poured the rest of the pot, and set it on the counter with more force than needed. The envelope was under your door, not his. Whoever left it did not go to his room from outside. They came from inside the house. Or they knew the door code. I felt the backs of my knees go soft. The code was known to 3 people. Me, Leo, Patricia, and Richard. Because I had given it to him once when Emily was sick and he said he'd drop off files. I need to see the rest of the feeds, I said. We watched the driveway next. At 1:58, a car I did not recognize pulled in. Stayed 4 minutes. Left. The driver's door opened. A hand came out. Something dropped to the ground by the step. The camera was too high to catch the face, but the hand wore a ring. A wide gold band. Richard's father had given him that band at his own wedding, and he never took it off. Bastard, I said. The word came out flat. Not angry yet. Just named. Patricia refilled my cup. Stai calmo. You are useful to him only if you are calm. If you break, he wins before he starts. I drank. The coffee was sour, strong enough to peel paint, exactly how she made it when she thought I was about to do something stupid. He wants me to think Leo is in danger. Or Leo is in danger, and Richard wants you to think it is a game. Either way, you pay. He makes you pay every year, no? She meant the $46,000. The annual transfer Richard had framed as a confidentiality fee, a quiet payment to keep certain company records from surfacing, records that would show Emily's signature on documents she'd never seen. I had paid it for 9 years. This would be the 10th. I don't have $46,000, I said. And even if I did, paying him never stopped him. Then we stopped guessing. You call Leo. Now. Hear his voice. Then we decide what is real. I called. He picked up on the second ring. Background noise of a dorm, someone laughing, a microwave beeping. Dad? It's like 4:45 here. This better be good. Just checking you're in your room. Dad, I'm literally in bed. I have an exam. Might the existential crisis wait until my final project presentation is done? I'll call you in the morning. Love you. Love you too, weirdo. Go to sleep. I ended the call. Patricia watched me, arms crossed. He is alive. He is at school. The photo is old or staged. We move from there. Someone cleared his room. That is not staged. They moved things to make you see empty. They did not take him. There is a difference, Daniel. One is a threat. One is a kidnapping. Richard is not stupid enough for the second. He wants you afraid, not arrested. I sat at the office desk. The monitors glowed. On the hallway feed, the figure from Leo's room appeared again at 2:30, walked to the front door, and paused. The pause lasted 10 seconds. Then the figure bent, placed something at the threshold and left. The envelope. She placed it, I said. The figure is you on the hallway feed. Patricia did not deny it. I placed it after I found it outside. I brought it in because the wind all toward the take in it. I did not want you to miss it. Stupid, maybe. But there it is. Why not wake me? Because you sleep 4 hours a night and dream of Emily. I thought one more hour would not matter. I was wrong. I am saying so. The honesty landed quiet. I nodded. We agree someone was in the house before 2. Someone with the code. Someone who left a photo of Leo and a smell like Richard's aftershave. The watch in the photo, Patricia said. The ring on the driveway. These are things Richard has. They are also things many men have. We need more than a shadow. I opened the bank feed on the office computer. The screen showed my accounts, the scheduled transfer pending for next week. $46,000 to a consulting account Richard controlled. The amount sat there like a wound that would not close. He times it to Leo's tuition, I said. Every year, the demand comes the week before graduation season. He knows. I won't let Leo's name get dragged into a lawsuit. Patricia set her cup down. You built the company with him. He cannot just take it. He built the trap. The records show Emily authorized transfers she never authorized. If I refuse to pay, he reveals the records. The board thinks I forged my dead wife's name to move company money, and I lose everything. Leo loses the tuition, the house, all of it. So you pay, so I pay. And he asks again next year. The old coffee machine clicked off in the kitchen. Patricia walked to it, opened the tray, and began wiping the grounds. He will keep asking. We both know. The question is what you do before he asks once too many. I want proof he was here. Not a shadow. Not a ring I can't prove is his. She looked at the monitor, then at the photo still on the counter. The photo paper. It was printed recently. There is a shop in town. The one by the pharmacy. They tag the back. With a date stamp. Bring it there. Ask. I can't walk in at 5 in the morning. Then at 9. Until then, you lock the doors, you call the security company, you tell them the code was used by someone not you, and you sleep. Or do not sleep. But stai calmo. I stood at the window. The street was gray now. The sun not yet up. And a neighbor's sprinkler clicked on across the way. That rhythmic ticking that usually meant a normal day. None of this was normal. My son had a shadow behind him in a photograph left at my door by someone who knew the code to my house. And the man who wore that aftershave had taken $46,000 from me every year since my wife died. I should have paid attention to what Patricia said next. I didn't. She pulled a chair to the office door and sat, the espresso tin on her lap. Mr. Lewis, there is something I have not told you. About why I took this job. About Emily. The name stopped me. Emily. My wife. Dead 10 years. The accident ruled a skid on a rain-slicked road. The investigation closed in 6 weeks. Patricia had never said her name aloud in 10 years of working for me. Emily? I said. She was my sister. Half-sister. Same father. Different mother. I learned after she died that Richard was at the scene the night it happened. He told the police he arrived after. The photos from the highway camera say he was there before. I came to work for you to find out why. The air in the room changed. I had hired a woman who had been investigating me, or near me, for a decade. And she had made my coffee every morning while she looked for the truth about her sister's death. You let me think you were just a housekeeper. I am a housekeeper. I am also her sister. I kept the job because you would not have let me stay if you knew. Richard would have known. He watches who comes close to you. How do you know he was there before? I saw the file. The highway patrol released the stills to the public archive. His car, the silver one, at the overpass at 11:40. Her call to 911 was at 11:52. He was 12 minutes early, Daniel. He was never early for anything in his life. I sat down hard. The chair creaked. You've had this for 10 years. I had a suspicion for 10 years. I have a file for 3. I have proof for none, until now. The envelope. The photo. The ring on the feed. These are threads. We pull them. Richard feels it. Why tell me now? Because the room was emptied and the photo left at your door means he is moving. He does not move unless he is ready to finish something. Finishing, for Richard, means you in prison or you dead. I would rather you alive and angry than dead and quiet. The monitor blinked. The bank screen still showed the pending transfer. $46,000. The number that had owned me for a decade. I need to see the full driveway feed, I said. From midnight. Patricia stood, leaned over the desk, and scrolled the timeline. At 12:40, the silver car again, longer this time, 22 minutes. The driver exited, walked to the side of the house where Leo's window faced the backyard. Stood there, then returned. The figure was Richard's height, Richard's build, and the gold band caught the camera's infrared as the hand adjusted the collar against the cold. I'll be damned, I said. Patricia closed the file. Now you know he was here. Now we decide if we tell anyone or if we wait until we can end him. We wait. We build. We don't move until we have the night he killed Emily. Stai calmo, Daniel. Gridare non aiuta nessuno. But yes, we wait. The coffee will keep you awake. It might also remove rust. Drink it. I drank. The cup was empty too soon. I set it down and walked back to the monitors. And that was when I noticed the office computer had not been on sleep. The screen behind the bank feed showed a browser window I had not opened. A wire transfer page. The recipient field filled with Richard's consulting account. The amount field showed $46,000. And the send button was one click from Lit. I had not opened that page. Patricia had been in the kitchen. Leo was at school. The only person with the code who was not in this room tonight was Richard, and the cursor was blinking like he had been here, at my desk, watching the transfer he had already decided I would make. Richard, you have some nerve showing up here. I kept my voice low, the way I do when I need to sound calm but the words feel like stones in my throat. He stood in the doorway of my office, his silver hair neat, his smile the kind that never reached his eyes. Daniel, I heard about the trouble at your house. I thought I'd stop by to see if you needed any help. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. The click sounded louder than it should have. I glanced at the monitor still glowing with the wire transfer page. The cursor blinked, waiting. I don't need help from you, I said, my hands resting flat on the desk. I can handle my own affairs. He chuckled, a soft sound that seemed to vibrate in the stale air. Of course you can. But sometimes a second pair of eyes catches what we miss. He moved toward the desk, his gaze flicking to the screen. That looks like a sizable transfer. $46,000, isn't it? His tone was light, almost conversational. But the way his eyes narrowed made my stomach tighten. I felt a heat rise in my neck. That's none of your business. I tried to keep my voice even, but the words came out sharper than I intended. He didn't flinch. Instead, he lifted his left wrist, showing me the watch I knew all too well. The face was scratched, the band worn, but the engraving on the back was unmistakable, Emily's initials, a tiny EL inside a heart. My breath caught. Where did you get that? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. He looked down at the watch as if seeing it for the first time. Oh, this old thing? Emily left it to me in her will. Said I could have it as a keepsake. He turned his hand, letting the light catch the metal. She always said it reminded her of our trips to the coast. The lie hung between us, thin and brittle. I knew Emily never mentioned a will, never spoke of leaving anything to him. The watch had been in her jewelry box the day she disappeared, and I had only seen it once since then. Patricia entered the room then, carrying a tray with 2 mugs of coffee. She set them down without a word, her eyes flicking between Richard and me. I'll leave you gentlemen to talk, she said, her voice soft but edged with something I couldn't name. She moved toward the door, pausing only when Richard spoke again. Patricia, could you stay a moment? I'd like to hear your thoughts on the situation. His smile was polite, but his eyes held a challenge. She hesitated, then nodded, placing her hands on the back of a chair. I'm listening, she said, her tone neutral. Richard leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk. Daniel, you've been under a lot of stress lately. The business, the rumors, the extracurricular activities. He let the last word hang, his gaze drifting to the coffee mug. I think it would be wise to let someone you trust handle the finances for a while. I have experience with these sorts of matters. He tapped a finger against the watch. I could oversee the accounts, make sure nothing slips through the cracks. I felt the old anger flare, the kind that had burned quiet for years. You want to oversee my accounts? I asked, my voice rising just a fraction. After what you did to Emily? The words escaped before I could stop them. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes flashed, just for a split second, with something like annoyance. You're letting grief cloud your judgment, Daniel, he said, his tone smooth, almost fatherly. Emily's accident was a tragedy, but blaming me won't bring her back. It will only hurt you and Leo. He glanced at the door where Patricia stood. She's been loyal for 10 years. Surely you can see she has your best interests at heart. Patricia stepped forward, her expression unreadable. I've stayed because I needed answers, she said, her voice steady. Not because I wanted to be a spy or a pawn. She looked at Richard, then at me. Richard gave me a job when no one else would. He paid me well, and I kept my head down. But I also kept notes. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I've been tracking the money that leaves your account each year. The same amount, always $46,000, always labeled as a consulting fee. She unfolded the paper and slid it across the desk. See here? The dates match the withdrawals. The recipient is a shell company registered in his wife's name. The trail goes dark after that, but the pattern is clear. I stared at the document. The numbers were familiar, the wording cold and official. My mind raced back to the wire transfer page on the screen, the cursor blinking like an invitation. You're saying he's been laundering money through my firm? I asked, my voice hushed. Not just laundering, Patricia replied. He's making you complicit. If anyone ever looked, they'd see you signing off on those transfers. He's built a safety net for himself, using your name as the shield. She glanced at Richard, whose smile had tightened. And now he's trying to push you over the edge, to make you break so he can take everything. Richard stood slowly, the chair scraping against the floor. I think it's time I left, he said, his voice deceptively gentle. Daniel, consider what I've said. A little help could save you a lot of headache. He moved toward the door, pausing to look at the watch on his wrist one more time. Emily would want you to move on, not dwell in the past. He opened the door, stepped into the hallway, and closed it softly behind him. The silence that followed felt thick, like wool stuffed in my ears. Patricia remained, her hands clasped in front of her. I have something else, she said, her voice dropping to a murmur. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, battered USB drive. The label was handwritten in faded ink. Emily, the final version. She placed it on the desk beside the coffee mugs. I made a copy of the file she kept before she died. I've held on to it for years, waiting for the right moment to use it. She looked at me, her eyes fierce. I didn't dare go public without something to back it up. This might be enough. I picked up the drive, feeling its weight, the plastic edges worn smooth from use. The screen behind us still showed the wire transfer page. The send button one click from lit. My thumb hovered over the mouse, the urge to delete the page warring with the need to keep the evidence visible. What's on it? I asked. My voice barely more than a breath. Emails, bank statements, a recording of a conversation between Richard and a contractor the night Emily died, Patricia said. It's not perfect, but it shows he was there. That he discussed the route. That he knew the weather would be bad. She hesitated. I kept it safe. But I was afraid. Afraid that if I moved too soon, he'd notice and disappear. Afraid that if I waited too long, Leo would pay the price. I set the drive down carefully, the metal cool against my fingertips. We need to show this to someone, I said, my thoughts racing. But we can't go to the police yet, not without more. I glanced at the monitor again, the cursor blinking steadily. He's watching us. He knows we saw the transfer. Patricia nodded. He thinks he's ahead. He thinks we'll panic and pay. Or that we'll fold under the pressure. She stood, smoothing her skirt. I'll keep gathering what I can. You keep your eyes open. And Daniel, don't let him make you feel guilty for wanting the truth. She left the office, the door clicking shut behind her. I was alone with the hum of the computers, the faint scent of coffee, and the weight of the USB drive in my hand. The screen still displayed the pending transfer. The amount glowing in bold numbers. $46,000. The send button waited. One click away from sealing a deal I never agreed to. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking under my weight. My mind flashed to the watch on Richard's wrist, to the way his eyes had flickered when I mentioned Emily, to the quiet certainty in Patricia's voice when she spoke of the file. I felt the old fire stir, not the blind rage of before, but a steady burn that promised action. I would not let him use my name as a shield any longer. I would not let him threaten Leo without a fight. The monitor blinked once, twice, as if marking the passage of time. I reached for the mouse, not to click send, but to open a new tab and begin searching for the shell company Patricia had mentioned. The clock on the wall ticked onward, each second a reminder that Richard's game was far from over. I slipped the key into the lock and turned it slowly, feeling the cold metal bite my palm. The night air was cool against my cheek as I stepped onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me. A faint scent of jasmine lingered from the garden nearby. I paused, listening to the distant hum of traffic on the highway that ran a mile east. Daniel's house stood quiet, except for the soft click of the lock. Engaging. I moved toward the study where I had left him earlier, his silhouette still bent over the computer screen. The glow of the monitor painted his face in a pale blue hue that made the lines around his eyes look deeper. I cleared my throat before speaking, hoping my voice would not betray the tension coiling in my chest. Patricia said, "Daniel, you look exhausted." He lifted his gaze and offered a tired smile that did not reach his eyes. "I've been staring at that transfer screen for too long," he replied, rubbing his temples. I stepped closer and placed the small USB drive on the desk beside his coffee mug, feeling its familiar weight. "I copied everything onto this drive before the intruder took the original," I said, keeping my tone steady. He glanced at the device, then back at the screen where the pending transfer waited for a single click. "You kept it safe all this time," he murmured, his voice low. "Why wait until now?" I inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of years press against my ribs. "I needed proof that could not be dismissed as coincidence," I answered. "The recording, the emails, the bank traces, they all point to him being at the crash site that night." He nodded, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the desk. "If we show this to the police, they'll need more than a recording," he said. "They'll need something that ties him directly to the money flow." I felt a spark of hope flare, then falter as doubt crept in. "What if he's already covered his tracks?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. "Then we make him think we're still blind," he replied. "We let him think we'll pay, and we watch his next move." I felt a chill run down my arms despite the warmth of the room. "And Leo?" I whispered. He glanced toward the hallway, where his son's bedroom door stood closed. "He's safe at school," he said. but Richard knows how to twist fear into compliance. I nodded, feeling the resolve harden like steel beneath my skin. Then we play his game until we have the upper hand. He stood and walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside to stare into the darkness. The street lamp cast a thin silver line across the wet pavement. I heard the soft click of his phone as he glanced at the screen, then slipped it back into his pocket. "I'll start digging into that shell company you mentioned," he said. "You stay close to the house, keep your ears open." I watched his reflection in the glass, his jaw set, his shoulders tense. "And you?" I asked. He turned his eyes, meeting mine for a brief moment, before looking away. "I'll stay ready." He gave me a short nod, then turned back to the desk, his fingers poised over the mouse. I felt the urge to speak, to warn him, but held back, knowing any misstep could tip the balance. Instead, I moved to the doorway and glanced down the hall, where a faint shadow shifted near the coat closet. My heart hammered as I realized someone else was there. I pressed my back against the wall and held my breath, listening. A soft click echoed from the living room, followed by the murmur of a voice I knew too well. Richard's tone was smooth, almost playful, as if he were discussing the weather rather than a looming threat. "Daniel, you look tense, my friend," he said. "Everything all right?" I could not see him, but I could picture his smile, the one that never reached his eyes. Daniel's voice came low and guarded. "Just working late, Richard." There was a pause. Then Richard chuckled low and dry. "You know I always worry about you and Leo. Family comes first, doesn't it?" I felt my stomach tighten as I imagined his hand resting on the door jamb, his gold ring catching the dim light. The words were honeyed but laced with something colder. "I appreciate that, Daniel, truly," Richard continued. "If you ever need a hand with anything, finances, legal matters, just say the word." I heard the faint rustle of paper as if he were sliding something across the desk. Then his tone shifted just a fraction, becoming more insistent. "Remember the $46,000. It's not a burden, it's a safeguard for everyone involved." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of those words settle like stone in my gut. He was framing the extortion as protection, a twisted altruism that made my skin crawl. Daniel's reply was barely audible. "I'll think about it." Richard's laughter was soft, almost affectionate. "Take your time. I'll be around." Then there was the sound of footsteps retreating toward the front door. I heard the door open and close, the soft click of the lock engaging once more. Silence rushed back in, thick and heavy. I waited a beat, then slipped from my hiding place and moved toward the study doorway, peeking inside. Daniel sat still, his hands resting on the keyboard, his eyes fixed on the blank screen where the transfer prompt had vanished. He looked up as I entered, his expression a mixture of relief and lingering tension. "He's gone," I whispered. He exhaled a long breath that seemed to lift a weight from his shoulders. "For now." I placed the USB drive back on the desk, his fingers brushing mine as he took it. "We have what we need," he said. "Now we need to make sure it sees the light of day." I nodded, feeling the resolve in my chest harden. Outside, a sudden gust rattled the window panes, sending a shiver through the old house. In that moment, I heard a distinct click from the hallway closet, the one where we kept the extra set of keys. Someone had turned the handle from the inside. My breath caught as the door swung inward, revealing a narrow beam of light spilling onto the floor. A shadow moved just beyond the threshold, a shape that seemed too tall, too still, to be a mere trick of the light. I froze, my heart pounding, as the figure stepped forward and slipped a small envelope onto the console table before retreating back into the darkness and pulling the door shut with a soft click. The envelope lay there, plain white, a silent question waiting to be answered. I stared at it, my mind racing with possibilities as the house settled back into its uneasy quiet. The sharp, rhythmic tapping of rain against the window pane drummed a frantic beat into the glass, vibrating against my forehead as I pressed it against the cold pane. My skin felt clammy, damp with a sheen of nervous sweat that refused to dry even in the drafty hallway. I pulled away, the sensation of the cold glass lingering on my skin like a physical bruise, and looked back at the console table. The white envelope remained exactly where it had been placed, a stark, pale rectangle against the dark mahogany. Patricia stood at the far end of the hall, her silhouette rigid against the shadows. She held a damp dishcloth, her knuckles white as she wrung the fabric with steady, deliberate force. She did not look at me, but her voice cut through the sound of the rain with sharp, clinical precision. "Daniel, do not touch it yet," she said. "I need to know what is inside, Patricia," I replied, my own voice sounding thin and jagged in the quiet space. "Patience is a muscle. You have let yours atrophy," she snapped, her eyes finally flickering toward me. "Richard thinks you are a frantic animal caught in a trap. Give him the performance he expects, while we prepare for the reality he cannot see." I walked toward the table, my feet feeling heavy on the hardwood floor. "He is destroying this company, ledger by ledger. If I don't look at this now, he might have already moved to the next step. And if you open it and it is booby-trapped with a tracking device or a chemical irritant, you are blind for the next 3 days," she countered. She moved closer, the scent of lavender and bleach clinging to her apron. "Stai calmo. My sister was a master of the double bluff. I suspect she left things exactly where they needed to be found." I reached out, my fingers hovering an inch above the paper. It felt strangely light, almost hollow. What if this isn't from Emily? What if it is another message from Richard, testing us? "Then we treat it as an enemy contact," she whispered, her gaze scanning the darkened living room. "Pick it up with the letter opener. The silver one with the ivory handle. It is in the kitchen drawer." I turned, but the heavy thud of the front door latch echoed through the foyer, followed by the slow, measured turn of the deadbolt. I couldn't breathe for a full second. We had locked that door. I watched as the wood creaked inward, a sliver of the rainy night air rushing in to meet us. Richard Grant stood on the porch, his trench coat soaked, his face a mask of practiced concern. "Daniel, thank God," Richard said, his voice smooth as oil. He stepped into the entryway, without an invitation, shedding his coat like a second skin. I was halfway back to the office when I remembered the files. I forgot to mention the secondary audit report. Patricia stepped into the light, her face composed into the mask of a dutiful housekeeper. "Mr. Grant." "We were just finishing up for the evening." "Patricia," Richard acknowledged with a shallow, dismissive nod. He turned his attention to me, his eyes wide and bright. "Daniel, you look like you have seen a ghost. Are you all right?" I stood in front of the console table, blocking his view of the envelope. "I am fine, Richard. Just tired. It has been a long night." "I am sure," he said, moving toward the study. He walked with a proprietary air, as if the floorboards belonged to him by right. "The board of directors is going to be breathing down our necks tomorrow. The discrepancies in the accounts, the sudden loss of capital, it is messy." "I am aware of the mess," I said, my voice hardening. Richard stopped and turned, his hands tucked deep into his pockets. "Are you? Because it seems to me you are struggling to keep your head above water. Let me handle the audit, Daniel. I can smooth over the rough edges, move some funds to cover the gaps. It would be a shame to see you lose the legacy your father built because of a few administrative errors." "Administrative errors?" I stepped forward, the floor groaning under my feet. "Is that what you call the $46,000 that vanished from the firm's holding account? Paid out year after year." Richard's smile did not falter, but his eyes turned flat like dead glass. "That was for security, to keep the vultures away. You should be thanking me, not questioning the invoice." "I am questioning the invoice, Richard," I said, "and I am questioning why your signature appears on the routing authorization for my personal accounts. A necessity of our partnership," he said softly, walking closer. He moved with a predator's grace, closing the space between us until he was near enough that I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. "You are under a great deal of strain. I worry about you. I worry about Leo. It would be a tragedy if something were to happen to that boy while you are distracted by such trivial accusations. Patricia moved, her hand catching the edge of the console table. She deliberately knocked a brass vase off the surface. It shattered against the floor, the sound sharp and violent. "Oh, Mr. Grant, I am so sorry," Patricia cried, her voice high and fluttering. "I am just so clumsy tonight." "Let me get the broom." Richard recoiled, his focus broken. He glanced down at the shards of brass and glass scattered near his polished shoes. "Watch yourself, Patricia." I used the second of his distraction to sweep the envelope from the table and into the pocket of my blazer. I felt the paper crinkle against my thigh. "I need to go," Richard said, his tone biting. "I have papers to file. When you decide you are ready to be a rational partner again, call me. Until then, keep the files secure." He turned on his heel and strode back out into the rain, leaving the door standing wide open. The wind howled into the foyer, extinguishing the dim lamp on the wall. I stood in the dark for a heartbeat, my hand clutching the envelope inside my pocket. "He knows," I whispered. "He suspects," Patricia corrected, picking up the larger pieces of the vase. "There is a difference. He came here to plant a seed of doubt, not to harvest the truth." I walked into the study and pulled the envelope out, my hands trembling as I tore the flap. Inside, there was no letter, no invoice. Just a single photograph of Richard at the site of the accident 10 years ago, and a slip of paper with a series of coordinates. I stared at the numbers. They pointed to a remote property in Connecticut, a plot of land that belonged to a shell company I had never heard of until tonight. "What is it?" Patricia asked, stepping into the doorway. "A location," I said, my heart drumming a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "He's been hiding something there. Something that ties back to the crash." "Then we have our battlefield," she replied. Before I could answer, the phone on the desk began to ring, the shrill sound cutting through the silence of the house. I hesitated. It was past midnight. I reached out and pressed the speaker button. "Daniel." A voice rasped. It was not Richard. It was the frantic, panicked voice of a lawyer I had not spoken to in years. "You need to leave the house. Now. The injunction was filed 5 minutes ago. They are coming to seize the records based on the audit reports Richard submitted to the state. If they find you there with the files, you are finished." "Who is this?" I demanded. "It does not matter," the voice hissed. "The police are 2 blocks away. Richard didn't just threaten you, Daniel. He framed you." The line went dead, leaving only the dial tone. I turned to Patricia, the color draining from her face. I reached for the desk lamp, but as my fingers brushed the switch, a heavy blow hammered against the front door, the wood splintering under the weight of an iron ram. 3 hours after the police took my statements, I found myself alone in the dim hallway outside the interrogation room, the fluorescent light humming overhead like a tired insect. My blazer hung heavy on my shoulders, the pocket where I had kept the envelope now empty. The paper gone with the stranger who had slipped past Patricia's watchful eyes and taken the original USB from her trembling hands. I had not seen the intruder's face, only a blur of dark coat and the sound of a drawer snapping shut as Patricia cried out, her voice raw and fractured. Patricia appeared beside me, her cheeks streaked with something that might have been tears or maybe just the rain that had begun to tap against the windows. She whispered, "He came in while I was getting coffee, said he was a technician needing to check the security feed." I believed him. Her fingers twisted the edge of her apron, a nervous habit I had seen only when she thought no one was looking. I pushed off the wall and walked toward the study, where the desk lamp still cast a warm pool of light over the scattered papers, the open laptop, the half-drunk mug of coffee that had gone cold. The phone on the desk buzzed a sharp, insistent tone that made me flinch. I glanced at the caller ID and saw the name of the firm's chairman. My throat tightened as I answered. "Daniel Lewis, this is Harold Green." The voice was smooth, but carried an edge I had never heard before. We have received notification from the board regarding the recent audit findings. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending further investigation. Please surrender your keys and access cards to security. I swallowed the words that rose like bile and said, "Understood." The line clicked off, leaving a dead silence that felt louder than any dial tone. I set the receiver down slowly, feeling the cool plastic against my palm. Patricia stepped closer, her voice low. "They are using the forged records again. Richard has filed something with the state. They are coming for the files." She glanced toward the door as if expecting someone to burst in. A sudden knock shattered the quiet. I moved to the door and peered through the peephole. A man in a dark suit stood on the porch, his hand raised as if about to knock again. I opened the door just enough to speak. "Mr. Grant." My tone was flat, the way I used when I needed to sound calm, but the words felt like stones in my throat. Richard's smile was polite, his eyes hidden behind reflective lenses that caught the hallway light. "Daniel, I heard about the trouble at the office. I came to see if there is anything I can do to help." He stepped forward, his shoes making no sound on the hardwood. Patricia appeared from the kitchen, her arms crossed, her expression guarded. "You are not welcome here, Richard." He ignored her and turned to me, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know Leo is preparing for his graduation next week. It would be a shame if something were to interfere with that ceremony." He paused, letting the words hang. "I have ways of making sure things go smoothly." I felt my jaw tighten, the muscles in my neck cord like rope under strain. "Leave my son out of this." Richard chuckled softly. "I am only looking out for the boy's future, as I have always looked out for yours." He glanced at Patricia, then back at me. "Perhaps you should consider the offer again. $46,000 is a small price to keep everything quiet." Patricia stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. "He will not take your money. He will not let you hurt his family." Richard's smile faded just a fraction. "We shall see." He turned and walked back to the porch, his coat swinging slightly as he descended the steps. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving a hollow echo in the foyer. Patricia leaned against the wall, her breath coming in short gasps. "He knows I have been looking into the crash. He knows I have the recording. He is trying to scare me into silence." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her fingernails leaving faint marks on her skin. I sank onto the nearest chair, the wood hard against my thighs. The events of the last few hours pressed on my chest like a weight I could not shift. My vision blurred for a moment, the room tilting as if the floor had given way beneath me. I gripped the armrests, feeling the grain dig into my palms. Patricia knelt beside me, her hand warm on my forearm. "Breathe, Daniel. In and out." She counted softly, her voice, a steady rhythm against the panic threatening to rise. After a moment, the haze cleared enough to the room steadied. I pushed myself up and walked toward the study again, my steps heavy. I needed to be alone, to think, to feel the weight of the evidence we had gathered, and the evidence we had lost. I reached for the door of my bedroom and turned the knob slowly, feeling the cool metal bite my palm. The door opened to a familiar space. The bed unmade, the nightstand cluttered with a half-read novel and a framed photo of Emily smiling, her eyes, bright, her hair loose around her shoulders. I closed the door behind me and slid the bolt home, the sound of the metal sliding into place a small comfort in the chaos. I leaned against the door, my forehead resting against the wood, the cool surface grounding me. My thoughts raced, the empty USB, the suspended job, Richard's veiled threats, Patricia's fear. I could not let them win. I could not let Leo pay for my mistakes. Just then a soft knock came at the door. I opened it a crack to see Patricia holding a plain white envelope, her expression a mixture of hope and dread. "You said you had copied the file." I stated more than asked. She nodded, her eyes meeting mine. Before the stranger took the USB, I uploaded the encrypted copy to a secure cloud service I had set up years ago for Emily's personal documents. "The link and the password are in this envelope." She pressed the envelope into my hand, the paper thin but sturdy. I felt a spark of something I had not felt in days, a thin thread of possibility. Thank you. My voice sounded hoarse but sincere. Patricia hesitated, then added, Richard will not stop. He will keep looking for ways to break us. I looked down at the envelope, the flap sealed with a simple sticker. My mind turned to the photo we had found earlier, the one of Richard at the crash site, the coordinates to the remote property. The pieces were beginning to align, though the picture was still incomplete. A sudden movement at the window caught my eye. A figure in a dark coat stood beneath the street lamp, the glow catching the edge of a badge, or maybe just a glint of metal. I could not tell who it was, but the presence sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the night air. I stepped back from the window and closed the curtain, the fabric soft against my fingertips. The room fell into a quiet that felt both heavy and expectant. I will do as you wish, Daniel said, his voice low but steady. He stared at the envelope Patricia had left on his nightstand, the seal still intact. The cloud credentials felt like a lifeline threaded through his trembling fingers. He slipped the paper into his pocket and moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to scan the street. The dark coat had vanished, leaving only the empty glow of the street lamp on the wet pavement. He exhaled, the breath fogging the glass for a moment before fading. Patricia, he called, keeping his tone even. She appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed, eyes wary. You okay? He shook his head, the motion small but deliberate. I need to think. I need to plan. She stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. What do you have in mind? He turned to face her, the nightlight casting a soft halo around her silhouette. Richard wants more money. He thinks fear will make me comply. I will give him a reason to doubt his control. She frowned, the lines around her mouth deepening. You mean you will pay him again? No, he said. The word firm. I will meet him at Leo's graduation. A public place. Many witnesses. He will not risk a scene there. She blinked, surprise flashing across her features. Graduation is tomorrow. The arena holds thousands. He nodded. Exactly. I will appear to surrender the extra $46,000. I will bring a copy of the evidence. If he tries anything, the crowd will see. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. You are playing with fire. He returned the smile, thin and humorless. He has been playing with my life for 10 years. It is time the fire turned back on him. She moved to the small table and poured 2 cups of coffee. The aroma, rich and dark. She set one before him, the steam curling upward like a question. You still drink it black? He lifted the cup, the warmth seeping into his palms. Always. It keeps me awake. She sat opposite him, her hands wrapped around her own mug. What about the press? He set the cup down, the ceramic clinking softly. I have contacted a reporter from the local paper. She promised to keep my name out of it until I give the word. She wants the story, but she needs proof. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. And the recording? He tapped the pocket where the envelope rested. The cloud copy is safe. I will download it onto a secure drive tonight. If Richard makes a move, we will release it together. She nodded, her eyes narrowing. You must be careful. He watches. He stood, the chair scraping softly against the floor. I will be careful. I will also be ready. She rose as well, her gaze steady. I will be with you. Not as the housekeeper, but as Emily's sister. He placed a hand on her shoulder, the contact brief but grounding. Thank you, Patricia. She squeezed his arm once before letting go. Now get some rest. You will need clarity tomorrow. He walked to the door, paused, and looked back. I will see you in the morning. She watched him leave, the click of the latch echoing in the quiet hall. He moved down the corridor, his steps measured, each one a quiet declaration of intent. The house felt different now, less a prison and more a staging ground for the confrontation to come. He entered his study, the room familiar with its shelves of legal pads and the faint scent of old paper. He opened his laptop, the screen glowing softly. He navigated to the cloud service, entered the link and password from the envelope, and waited as the encrypted folder unpacked. Inside lay Emily's emails, the bank statements showing the fraudulent transfers, and the audio file where Richard's voice could be heard discussing the crash site. He saved everything to a flash drive, labeling it with a simple code only he and Patricia would understand. He placed the drive in his jacket pocket, next to the envelope containing the cloud credentials. He felt the weight of the metal against his thigh, a reminder of the evidence they had fought so hard to protect. A soft chime from his phone drew his attention. A message from the reporter. "Ready when you are. Stay safe." He typed a brief reply, his thumbs moving quickly. "Tomorrow, at graduation, I will have the proof." He set the phone down and leaned back in his chair, the tension in his shoulders easing fractionally. The night outside deepened, the street lamp casting a steady pool of light on the driveway. He imagined Richard standing there, unaware that the tide was turning. His thoughts drifted to Leo, currently unaware of the storm brewing around him. He pictured his son laughing with friends, preparing for the ceremony that should mark a new beginning, not a bargaining chip. The resolve in his chest hardened, cold and clear. He rose, stretched his arms above his head, and walked to the window again. The curtain was drawn, but he could feel the night's presence. He whispered a promise to the empty room, to Emily's memory, to his son's future. "I will not let you win," he said softly, the words hanging in the air like a vow. He turned off the light, plunged the study into darkness, and moved toward the bedroom. The door clicked shut behind him. The sound, final, yet hopeful. He slipped under the covers, the mattress familiar, and closed his eyes. Sleep came slowly. But when it did, it carried the faint echo of a plan taking shape. Pushed open the heavy auditorium door, and the wall of sound hit me first. 1,000 voices cheering under the bright lights strung across the stage. I scanned the crowd for Leo's face among the graduating seniors, and there he was, 7th row from the front, cap tilted the way he always wore it when he thought no one was looking. Patricia stood near the side exit, her expression calm, but her eyes never leaving the podium where Richard Grant was already adjusting the microphone. He wore a navy suit that cost more than my first development deal, and his gold ring caught the light each time he gestured to the audience. "Daniel," Patricia said, moving to my elbow, "the device is in your pocket. Do not fumble when the time comes." I felt the small transmitter against my thigh, next to the flash drive holding Emily's recording. "I know," I said. "Richard thinks today is his victory lap." She gave a short nod. "Stai calmo. He is about to learn otherwise." The dean introduced Richard as the distinguished alumnus and lead benefactor, and the room applauded with that polite rhythm of people who respect a name more than a man. Richard stepped to the microphone, his voice dropping into the warm tone he used for cameras. "Good afternoon, friends, and congratulations to our remarkable young men and women. Leo, young man, your father would be proud if he could see you today." I stiffened at the word father, because Emily was the only parent Leo had lost, and Richard knew it. I moved along the back wall toward the audio panel where the student technician sat with headphones on. "Excuse me," I said. The young man looked up. "Mr. Lewis? Mr. Grant said you might need the auxiliary input." He pointed to the port. I plugged the transmitter in, my hands steady now. Patricia watched from the doorway, and I caught her slight smile. Richard continued from the stage. "Some of you know I built my career beside a dear friend, Daniel Lewis. He taught me that community is everything." The lie landed soft, rehearsed, the kind he told at every fundraiser. I clicked the switch on the transmitter. The auditorium speakers crackled, Then Emily's voice filled the room, clear and unflinching. "If you're listening to this, Richard has already called you. He'll say I was reckless. I wasn't. I was just married to a man who trusted the wrong person." A pause, then her voice sharpened. "Rick, you hired the driver. I have the wire confirmation on my phone. 46,000 to an account in Cyprus. The same one you used to bleed Daniel for years. I'm sending this to Patricia. You won't bury us both." The auditorium went quiet, then a single gasp rippled outward. Richard's hand froze on the podium. "That is a forgery," he said, his calm cracking at the edges. "Daniel, you have clearly lost your grip on reality." I walked down the center aisle, the flash drive raised. "It isn't a forgery, Richard. The bank statements match the recording. The coordinates on the photo put you at the crash site the night Emily died." He stepped back, his public mask sliding into something colder. "You think a crowd saves you? I built the shell company. I forged the transfers. But you signed them, Daniel. You are the embezzler." I shook my head. "I signed under threat, and your own words just confirmed the threat on that tape." Patricia kept every copy. Patricia stepped forward from the exit. "Mr. Grant, I am Emily's sister, and I have watched you for 10 years. The cloud holds everything." 2 uniformed officers entered from the rear, moving with the unhurried certainty of men who had read a file. "Richard Grant," one said, "you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and evidence tampering. Turn around, please." Richard's shoulders stiffened, but he did not resist. "This is a misunderstanding," he said to the nearest camera. "My legal team will sort it out." The officer cuffed him, and the clicks sounded loud in the silent room. Leo stood now, confusion and something like recognition crossing his face. I reached him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Son, I owe you the truth. Richard killed your mother's investigation and framed me to keep it buried. Emily left the proof." Leo's jaw tightened. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" I met his eyes. "Because he threatened you first. I thought silence was protection. I was wrong." He exhaled, long and uneven. Okay. We fix it together then." Patricia joined us, her arms folded. "The company is cleared once the records are unsealed. Stai calmo, Daniel. The coffee can wait." I almost laughed. "The coffee can wait," I repeated. Richard was led past us, and for a moment his gaze met mine, flat and reptilian. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "You already lost everything," I answered. "That was the point you missed." The dean resumed the ceremony after the officers left, and the students walked the stage one by one. Leo received his diploma, and I clapped until my palms stung. When the crowd thinned, I returned to the house, the old coffee machine still humming on the kitchen counter where Patricia had left it that morning. I knelt, lifted the base, and my fingers found the small key taped underneath. Emily had shown me that hiding place once, laughing, saying the best secrets stay where everyone looks daily and no one checks. The key bore a tiny engraved letter E. I turned it over, the metal cool against my thumb. Patricia entered, setting down her mug. "She left something for you," she said. "The safe behind the study panel. Open it when you are ready. The key is in its usual place." I looked at the machine, the dented chrome, the stain from Daniel's spilled cup weeks ago. "What's inside?" Patricia shook her head. I never looked. Emily said it was the truth, even Richard did not know. I slid the key into my pocket, the weight heavier than the flash drive had been. The graduation was over. The arrest was real. But Emily's last gift waited in the wall, and I understood the night was not finished with us yet. I rose from the kitchen floor, the key cool in my palm, and walked toward the study where the wall panel waited. The house smelled of old paper and the faint tang of coffee that still lingered in the air. I pressed the flat of my hand against the seam, felt the slight give, and slid the panel aside. The key turned with a soft click. The safe door swung inward to reveal a single envelope, sealed with a wax stamp bearing Emily's initials. I broke the seal without hesitation. Inside lay a folded sheet of her handwriting. The ink slightly faded, but the words clear. If you are reading this, the truth has found its way out. Let it be a lantern, not a weapon. I traced the line with my thumb, feeling the weight of every night she had spent worrying, every quiet moment she had hidden hope behind a smile. I folded the paper again, slipped it into my jacket pocket, and closed the safe, the panel snapping back into place, as if it had never moved. Returning to the kitchen, I filled the chipped mug Patricia had left on the counter and watched the dark liquid swirl. The steam rose in thin ribbons, catching the light from the window above the sink. I thought of the years I had spent balancing fear and duty, of the way silence had become a second skin, and of the moment Leo had called me Dad. While his eyes searched for answers, I had been too afraid to give. I set the mug down, leaned forward, and rested my forehead against the cool edge of the counter, listening to the hum of the machine. A steady, unhurried sound that seemed to say, "Keep going." Later, I found Leo on the porch, his diploma case tucked under his arm, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun was beginning to dip. I sat beside him without speaking, letting the quiet settle between us. After a while, he turned to me, his expression softer than it had been all day. I handed him the envelope, the wax stamp catching the last glimmer of light. He opened it slowly, read the words, and then looked at me. Relief showed in his eyes, but he looked steady too. We stayed there until the light faded, the night wrapping itself around the house like a familiar blanket. When we finally rose, I felt the key in my pocket, a small, solid reminder that some secrets are meant to be kept, while others are meant to be shared, not as accusations, but as invitations. I poured another cup of coffee, lifted it to my lips, and let the steam rise once more. In that simple gesture, I sensed the question hanging in the air, waiting for anyone who had ever carried a quiet burden to answer with their own story. You close the safe, with the key now secured, and realize some truths are meant to illuminate, not wound. The lesson is simple yet hard. When you keep a worry locked away, it grows heavier. But when you let it out as an invitation rather than an accusation, it becomes a lantern that can guide both you and those you love. You have seen how silence turned into a second skin, how fear masqueraded as duty, and how a single note, let it be a lantern, not a weapon, changed the moment Leo read it, his eyes softening with resolve instead of hurt. Now, as you sit with the steam rising from your mug, you feel the weight of every night you spent hiding hope behind a smile, and you understand that sharing does not mean surrendering control. It means offering a piece of your light so others can find their own way. What quiet burden have you carried that, if laid open, could become a lantern for someone else walking in darkness? Let that question linger in the steam, and let your answer be the first step toward turning fear into fellowship. When you speak your truth, you not only lighten your own load but also give others permission to do the same.